Hey y'all, for tonight's video, I have a narration of a source engine creepypasta about a disturbing map that manipulates and shocks its players. Players that it may be more familiar with than they had first realized. Enjoy the video. Welcome to the blog. The gaming community of the early 2000s was very different to the one we have today. Without the ubiquity of wiki, YouTube playthroughs, and streaming, and with most communities receiving little to no moderation, all sorts of strange hoaxes and urban legends began to form. A lot of them were entirely fictional. Some of them had a grain of truth to them. Sometimes the truth was a lot more bizarre than anybody could account for. Despite the laudable effort that many of the modern gaming community have gone to uncover every last fact behind the modding scene, nobody has ever managed to get to the bottom of Training.Bsp. This blog is an attempt to set the record straight, or at least as straight as I can. The events I'm going to describe took place at least a decade ago, and I sadly didn't take nearly as many notes as I would have if I'd known 30-year-old me would be writing them up 10 years later. So please do forgive me if I'm free with the facts, or not as clinical as I could be. I'm not a games journalist here. I'm just going to tell the story as best as I can. Monday 19th, October 2015. Welcome to Zeke's Discount BSPs. As I said in the introductory post, the gaming community of the late 90s was a very different beast to the one we have today. Not just because of things seemed so much more unfinished, but without the ubiquity of social media, sometimes all you would know about someone would be a username and a typing style. Sometimes not even that. It's probably just that I was a teenager at the time, but things seemed so much more open and free. Anybody with an idea for a map could boot up Hammer, the Half-Life map editor, and cobble something together, which meant that there were hundreds upon hundreds of worlds to explore. Most of them were the same derivative stuff, of course, but that just meant the thrill you got when you found something genuinely unique or creative was that much more earned. The experience was like being an explorer on some alien planet, uncovering vistas that possibly nobody else had ever seen before. One of the greatest innovations in this sense of the unknown came with Sven Co-op, a hilariously bug-ridden mod for Half-Life that allowed you to play cooperative maps with people across the internet. The genius of the thing was how Sven Co-op allowed its multiplayer servers to download a map.bsp file to your PC if you didn't already have it. Instead of having to make sure that everybody had agreed on a map to download and install, you could just get your clan together online, find a server, and place yourselves at the mercy of its random map rotation. I mentioned that I played with the clan. We called ourselves Delta Force, and we started off playing deathmatch maps and giving each other ranks like in the army. As time went on, some of us, partially due to my enthusiasm for the co-op game, if I'm kind to myself, ended up drifting more and more into that side of things. That caused a bit of internal drama. Our then leader, who went by the tag Sergeant King, really didn't like them. He wasn't a bad guy, really, just one of those kids who had an absolute hard-on for the military and wouldn't shut up about it, despite his combat experience having gone no further than watching Vietnam film. Anyway, King got real snippy when we ended up spending more time playing co-op than deathmatch, and ended up leaving the clan in the kind of drama storm that only teenagers on the internet can generate. It was probably for the best anyway. We were all getting pretty tired of the faux military shtick. A couple of us kept the ranks King had given us ironically. I had called myself Sergeant Player (1), a joke on the way that Half-Life's default deathmatch name was just player, followed by (1) and (2) if that was already taken. So I figured I would switch to Professor Player (1). After all, we had all been demilitarized now. The new clan leader was a guy from Canada called Honk, all in lowercase. Honk was everything that King wasn't. Laid back, good-natured, and kind of a burnout. He was the obvious choice, really. Honk had always been the one to patch things up in the past, when King's obnoxiousness and chauvinism had pissed people off, and we'd all decided that we weren't interested in winning anymore. We just wanted to have fun and bum around weird new maps. For a long time, we played on the official servers that had the same rotation of tried and tested maps, mostly ones that came free with Sven Co-op, but it started to get to the stage where we'd run through everything there was to see, and we were starting to get disillusioned with the whole thing again. It felt like a lot of the more creative servers were dying off, especially once Half-Life 2 came out in 2004, and a lot of the Sven Co-op player base transitioned away to that. Then, one evening Honk mentioned on chat that he had found something new. Apparently, someone had linked one of the Planet Half-Life forums to a server they'd found called Zeke's Discount BSPs. He'd saved a bookmark to the thread, but Since then, it had been locked and deleted. A bit of digging turned up that a flame war had broken out over the server, allegedly stripping the credits from the maps it was using, and the mods had decided that it wasn't worth it. Honk hadn't been deterred though. Searching for Zeke's discount BSPs got him a homepage that simply read, "In unformatted HTML, Zeke's discount BSPs is closed for business." But whoever operated the site hadn't cleared the rest of the directory, and we were eventually able to find some subpages that had an IP address for the server, which was miraculously still up. And what a gold mine it was. The message of the day when you logged in just read, "Lack of punctuation included. Welcome to Zeke's Discount BSPs. All the maps you want to play for low, low prices." As far as we could tell, nobody was still moderating it. At least, we never saw anybody with the admin tag log in all the time we were there. In fact, we never saw anybody there other than ourselves. For all we knew, Zeke had set this thing to run on boot on a server at work, then lost his job and his replacement hadn't noticed. But whoever Zeke was, he was clearly a major hoarder of maps. It looked like he'd done a straight download of everything on Planet Half-Life at one point, finished or unfinished, and that was just for starters. There were all sorts of things in there, some of which barely qualified as playable. I remember one map called Don't Kill the Head Crab, where the players had to survive in a gradually shrinking room with a single enemy head crab without any one of them dying to it or anybody killing it. Another, called The Irritation Machine, simply required you to walk the length of a single long corridor and mocked you at the end for going to the effort. One called Defend the Forum sticks in my mind as a surprisingly detailed and well-designed map in which the players have to protect NPCs presumably named after posters in some long-dead forum from trolls. An onslaught of standard Half-Life grunts, all given names in obnoxious leet speak. It always struck me as a little depressing that somebody had poured so much time and effort into something that wouldn't have had much meaning outside of a tiny group of their peers. Then again, I guess that was pretty par for the course of being a teenager on the internet. Anyway, with us spending the amount of time that we did on Zeke's discount BSPs, it was inevitable that sooner or later we would encounter Training.Bsp. So that was the second blog post. I'll go to the third one here, which is actually titled Training.Bsp. Dated the 19th of October, 2015. Training.Bsp. Our first experience of Training.Bsp was waiting an obnoxiously long time for the map to download. This wasn't rare in and of itself, as there wasn't any size limit on a BSP file, and a lot of makers thought that it was the height of comedy to add South Park voice clips to every conceivable player action. I remember wondering if Training would be a voice-acted tutorial for advanced techniques like grenade jumping or building human ladders, which, for context, was one popular trick for finding shortcuts or just glitching your way out of a map. What you had to do was to get another player to crouch, then you would stand on their shoulders and repeat the experience with more and more teammates. What we got, though, was the clan squeezed into a small, monotextured room with a single dark exit, and the simple caption of Training on our screen. So far, so unimpressive. The exit took us out into a dimly lit subway tunnel, which we proceeded along. If you figured out the punchline to this one already, you're quicker than all of us. Either the designer clearly didn't have much of a sense of scale, or they'd never seen a proper subway, because the ceiling of the tunnel was way higher than it ought to be. The tunnel just continued straight without any change in texture. Just as I was starting to wonder whether we'd encounter an unwritten sequel to the Irritation Machine, I suddenly started seeing bullets fly and my health drop. The level had spawned a bunch of grunt enemies almost on top of us. They weren't anything special, although the maker had apparently modded them for increased health and damage, a common cheap shot among co-op map makers to counter the increased firepower that enemies would be facing. But just as we'd finished mopping them up, a message came on screen through team chat. Username Jersey99. Oh fuck, we looked up, and as one saw the bright light coming towards us down the tunnel, there was just enough time to realize we'd been had before a train plowed through the lot of us with the deafening woo woo whistling sound effect, insta-killing everybody who was still alive and ending the map shortly after. As I said, we really should have seen that coming. End blog post. Monday, 19th October 2015. The whistle of shame. After our humiliating defeat at the hands of a subway carriage, Training became kind of a byword for so bad it's funny map design. anytime we got wiped by a particularly low trick, and trust me, there were makers who delighted in exactly that kind of death trap, we would console ourselves by saying, at least it's not training. Even so, we stayed determined to beat it. The second time it showed up the random rotation, we made a plan. For all that Honk had hated King's military discipline style of leadership, he was great at getting people moving in the same direction. So some of us had stayed behind in the starting room. We had one of us check each side of the tunnel for alcoves we could dodge the train in. And the rest of us, including myself, went forward to deal with the ambush. The starting spawn room spawned a killer turret as the train showed up, wiping out the rear guard. It turned out there were alcoves to hide in, though that we'd missed our first time around. It did mean that the team who went forward to trigger the ambush were at much lower strength and ended up getting picked off. To cut a long story short, training required the players not only take out unexpectedly spawning enemies much tougher than themselves, but to do it quickly and then flee back to the alcoves before the train hit again. It wasn't a map that played fair, but that, coupled with the fact that it had rubbed its gimmick in our face before we'd even started playing, just added to our determination to beat it. It wasn't long before we decided to stop leaving it to the random map rotation instituted by Zeke, whoever he was, and start hosting it on our own servers. Now that we were playing Training.Bsp on loop, dying and dying again as we perfected our technique and dodged that asshole train and the whistle of shame, which we learned it would only play if it was actually killing a player. It wasn't long before we mastered it. The ending was kind of a letdown. At the end of the tunnel, there was a stairway leading off the tracks to a platform with one of the familiar Black Mesa airlocks, and opening the airlock ends the level. There were still a few things that didn't make sense to me though, unless the map was very lazily coded, or unless that whistle sample was absolutely enormous. There wasn't anything on there that warranted the enormous download, but then the whole thing was a mystery. I swapped virtual high fives with the rest of the clan, and we moved back to playing Zeke's random rotation of maps. The next time training showed up on Zeke's random rotation, we aced it. We didn't lose a single player to the whistle of shame or the teleporting soldiers. We had just reached the platform when Honk spoke on public chat. Honk, wait, don't finish yet. He'd spotted something. There was a vent in the wall of the platform that had some level geometry on the other side of it. A player wouldn't be able to reach it normally, but by building a human ladder, we were able to get one of us up to check it out. We'd learned from the map's previous tricks, so we just sent one of us through. Username divisible by 0. Guys, this is weird. There's a bedroom on the other side. Honk. Any doors? Divisible by 0. 1, plus a window. Both locked. Gonna check the room out. Oh, gross. At that, we couldn't stop ourselves. Everybody who could make it climbed onto Honk's back and crawled through the vent. On the other side, the maker of Training had built a surprisingly detailed replica of a bedroom, far better built than the rest of the map had been. The window looked out on a grimy, moonlit parking lot, as if we were in a motel room somewhere. But the room itself was incongruously clean and well lit, and covered, as so depressingly often seemed to be the case among amateur map makers, with posters of anime girls in not quite normal poses. I was the last to get there, so I was crawling through a logjam of the rest of the clan as they all got into the room, and voiced their horror at whatever it was Divisible had found. A few of them had even spontaneously logged out, but I still had to push my way through a crowd of allied characters in HEV suits to get there. In a chest at the back of the closet, the builder had rendered from polygons painstakingly 3D reproduction of the anime style, the dismembered corpse of a teenaged girl. End blog post. Monday, 19th October 2015. Divisible fucked up. I should say right now that the clan weren't the type they shot. One of the things I respected Honk the most for was drawing a line on the kind of edgy humor that a lot of online communities at the time indulged in. That said, we had all fallen for links to Goatsy, and worse, at some point or another. Even so, there was something about the way the body was rendered that just made you want to look away. Perhaps it was the way that the primitive engine made it seem to still be grinning excitedly. Or perhaps it was just the level of effort that the mapmaker had clearly put into modeling this thing and the world around it. Honk thought we were fucking with him at first when we explained what it was, and I had to crawl back through the vent and take a turn kneeling so that he could climb through himself. He wasn't impressed either, and he was trying to suggest we should move on when someone else, I can't remember who it was, realized that the door was now unlocked. Outside Training's bedroom is a long hall, wood paneled with purple carpeting. The whole map from this point onward seems to use entirely custom-built textures for its geometry, which would explain the large file size. I distinctly remember that I was one of the first ones through the door, and we had just started to check to see if any of the other doors were locked, when a slamming behind us informed us that it had closed again. The thing about the era before voice chat became commonplace is that panic makes a bad situation that much more of a clusterfuck, as people sacrifice the ability to move in order to hurriedly type "what the fuck." Personally, I ran back towards the room and got to watch the rest of my clan burst one by one into Gibbs before my character popped too. It was on. We went back to playing Training on loot on our clan's private server. It didn't take us long to work out what we'd done wrong. To keep the door to the rest of the map open, somebody had to keep their character facing the dismembered body. If they looked away, even for a moment, the door would slam shut again, and everybody inside the new secret area would burst into Gibbs, one at a time. Initially, Divisible by 0 volunteered for corpse watching duty, and the rest of us headed through to map the branching maze of hotel corridors beyond. Map is definitely the right word. The place was enormous, empty, and would take any opportunity to kill you without warning. Honk was still not happy about that. He kept saying that he didn't want to legitimize whatever point the maker was trying to. The more we explored, the more I started to agree with him. Whoever built Training clearly had a teenaged sense of humor that a lot of us had started to move on from, making players flip switches to kill the helpless scientist NPCs before doors would open, and then they could progress. Thinking about it now, this was around the same time that the Saw films started making their way into the main, so it could have well been he'd taken influence from them. By now, though, we'd gotten ourselves invested. When we posted about Training.Bsp on the forums, he talked about the mapmaker's plans as if we knew him personally, as if this had been a challenge that he'd set for us to complete. Some of us were even starting to speculate that we did, that it had been designed by King in an attempt to break our spirit. Whoever it was, it certainly became clear that he had a penchant for tricking players, murdering one another, with rooms like the double cell, as we like to call it. Here, 2 players would have to enter 2 prison cells simultaneously to hold down levers and allow the rest of the group to progress. The kicker came when either of them tried to leave. The first player to let go of their lever would be able to escape, but the other would be crushed messily. The whole experience seemed to be designed to set us at each other's throats, and for a while, it almost succeeded. But Honk's patience, in the end, kept us together. That was one of the puzzles that we had to navigate. There were others, far too many to describe here. I remember having to navigate through a maze of invisible barriers while the walls of the room flashed in vivid, ugly red and green zigzags. It wasn't until somebody posted in chat, "Oh, shit, guys, look away from the screen for a moment," that we realized that staring at the strobing walls had messed with our vision somehow, and we couldn't see correctly for a few minutes. The train from before had made a few guests reappear, now retextured so that its front piece was now smeared with blood and gore, with its trademark whistle as it flattened us. The mapmaker's gusto for anime girls continued unabated through the rest of the map, with the art style becoming more amateurish and crudely scanned as the level went on. We started speculating that we were looking at the designer's hand-drawn art. The first problem came when we finally figured out a path through the wood-paneled corridors and into a darker area, with walls of rusty and corrugated metal. Almost straight away, we heard it over chat. 2 lines that would replace the train's "woo woo" in our shared patois as the byline for failure. Divisible by 0. Shit, I fucked up. And, just like our first foray into the hotel corridors, the chat was filling with screams of frustration at Divisible. players started popping like meaty balloon. Corpse watching duty. The clan were pretty pissed at Divisible right then, but Honk heard him out. Divisible told us that the game had spawned a headcrab in the hotel room, and they'd broken eye contact with the corpse in an attempt to take it out. They also said, in no uncertain terms, that they weren't going to spend a minute longer staring at a dismembered cartoon corpse so that some people on the internet could run around a maze of death traps. This was a fair call, and Divisible ended up leaving with our best wishes. Divisible got into WoW instead and picked up some new pronouns somewhere along the path. Divisible got into World of Warcraft instead and picked up some new pronouns somewhere along the path. Sorry about the older posts, by the way. I'll go back and fix them, and we still speak from time to time. Our next plan was to have one of us watching the corpse, and one of us protecting them from Divisible's head crab, while the rest of the clan tackled the labyrinth. All of a sudden, though, it turned out that remarkably few members of the clan were willing to volunteer. In the end, I stepped forward. Jersey 99 stayed to take out the head crab, and it showed up. Keeping your screen focused on a scene of gore, even cartoon gore, is harder than it looks. I didn't want to miss what the rest of the clan were up to, but there was something about that terrifying, wide-eyed grin that kept drawing my eye away from the blow-by-blow report in chat. Still, I knew at this point that was this or disappoint a group of people who made up, at that point, almost my entire circle of friends. Jersey 99 and I were ready for the head crab, but it never came. It was just a sound effect, designed to panic whoever was watching the corpse into breaking eye contact and killing their teammate. I found this reassuring. At first, it meant that we didn't need to waste an extra body on keeping the room safe, and that I didn't need to rely on anybody else watching my back. Then, I realized that it would mean I was alone in the room with this thing, listening to the battle report coming in like the helpless general in some bad sci-fi movie. And things did get bad. Outside of the hotel corridors, the map really stops pulling its punches. The pure puzzles stop, and the players have to jump from moving platform to moving platform, often while their teammates defend them from attack by multiple enemies. Whoever the designer was, they must have been years ahead of their time. You can encounter gameplay tricks in Training.Bsp that it would take Blizzard some time to develop and polish to a shine for elaborate raid bosses in World of Warcraft. The real battle is in the hotel room, though, and it is purely psychological. It turns out that the headcrab screech is the first and crudest of a number of tricks that the hotel room will play in order to get you to break eye contact. I think the mapmaker tried it out first as a test, and when he realized how well it worked, let loose every cruel trick that he could imagine. The first thing to happen after the screech is that the lights in the room will dim and go out, leaving you alone in the dark with a disembodied corpse. The first instinct in this situation is to turn on your flashlight, at which point you discover that it has moved, only slightly, and it's still in pieces. But by this point, you've been staring at it for a good 10 minutes. You know that thing like the back of your hand, which is a disturbing realization in and of itself. But you know that it is just a character model, of course, so you continue to watch it. Just you, the corpse, and a flashlight, alone in a darkened room, as your friends are picked off one by one somewhere else. Sooner or later, though, your flashlight is going to run out of battery, a feature carried over from Half-Life, and one which the designer seems to have anticipated. Because just as your flashlight gives up for good, plunging you into darkness, you see it starting to get to its feet. End blog post. October 19th, 2015. Nodding with the dead. I fucked up. Also, I should note, this isn't the story, this is just me, that the way they're spelling I fucked up is I space F-U-C-K-E space D-U-P. So some of the joke from earlier is that Divisible was in such a hurry to type out I fucked up that he spelled it a little, messed up. Well, fucked up, I guess. I knew it was just a game, and I still freaked out and tried to get as far away as I could from that thing with its blank grin and its severed arms dangling like the limbs of a puppet. And my clan got wiped again. They were pretty pissed, but funny thing, when I offered to let one of them take over, there wasn't a single taker, not one. If I sound like a big drama queen about this, I guess, well, if you spend that amount of time staring at a corpse in a darkened room, then maybe you're entitled to a little drama. And I guess it's kind of hypocritical for me to go off on one about teenage gamer hysteria and then vent about a spooky map for a long dead FPS in the next breath. But you know what? This was tough for me, so bite me. I was actually considering removing that paragraph, but I figure I ought to stand by my mistakes, even the run-on train of thought ones. So anyway, back to Training.Bsp. It was around about this point that we decided to try breaking the map open in Hammer and skipping to the end. Aside from anything else, those of us who did dabble in map making were itching to figure out how the designer had managed some of its tricks. No luck though. Opening the thing up crashed the editor catastrophically. Wrinkles, our expert modder, reckoned that he'd filled the file with garbage geometry that made it impossible to open. It's possible that a modern computer would have the memory to handle it, but our shitty boxes back then didn't stand a chance. In any case, I was ready for the jump scare the second time around, and I didn't even flinch at the sample of heavy, strained breathing that you get now that the dead girl is standing there, inches from your character's face. It's at this point in the development cycle that the mapmaker must have had a brainstorm, because now it starts to talk to you, not in local chat, not in text, through a strained, high-pitched voice sample that instructs you to nod if you understand. A simple swish of the mouse, up and down. It's a cheap trick, because of course if you nod too much, then you'll break eye contact with. And in the dark, it's difficult to tell exactly how far is too far. It also means that you find yourself nodding along at computer desk, just like how you're probably nodding without realizing as you read them. So for a while, you listen while it talks and gets you to nod along to whatever it's saying. Because while you don't know at this point that disobeying it will kill the rest of your team, and you're not sure the game can even tell whether your character is nodding yet, you sure as hell don't want to disappoint them a second time. It gets you to promise not to talk to them without its permission, and to agree about how exciting it feels to have the power to kill so many people with such little effort. Again, all cheap tricks, but it plays them well, and for me at least, it was playing them for the first time. What screwed things up for that run was the game's next instruction, to type "time to die" in chat, and the name of one of the players. It's probably easiest to just post the transcript after this. Okay, so this is like a series of messages that they typed in-game. Professor Player 1, time to die, Jersey 99. Honk. Professor Player, what are you doing? Jersey 99 died. That's not a statement said by any of the players. By the way, that's like a game status. Player Jersey 99 actually died. Jersey 99, parenthesis dead. What the fuck? Honk. Not funny, man. I think this is this player's name. Corporal LPC. Did he fucked up again? With fucked up being spelled like how it was before. A player named 90th says, "God damn it. Professor Player 1. Game told me to type it. Sorry. Part of its mind games. Corporal LPC died. Honk. Died. Corporal LPC now dead speaks up. You stupid asshole. Jockstrap. Died. 90th. Died. Wrinkles. Died." The death count carried on from there. When the game tells you to stop talking in chat, it's not joking around. End blog post. Again, 19th October 2015, titled "Honk in Charge." Things got pretty ugly after that. Accusations started flying around that I had done it deliberately, somehow. That I had created the map in order to fuck with it. That I was spying on the clan on behalf of King. And this was part of his revenge on us. A few of them even talked about doxing me, ostensibly to confirm that I wasn't an alt of King. The usual bullshit. But the fact that the clan had been banging their collective heads against this map for so long hadn't exactly been good for morale. There's something about the way it's built, something that goes beyond regular tension and jump scares, and makes you feel kind of sick and dirty inside, degraded even, for even coming into contact with. And I guess we were all starting to feel it. Even after cooler heads prevailed, nobody was happy for me to carry on with corpse watching. So from there on in, with nobody else ready to step up, Honk eventually volunteered, with orders so that the clan to ignore anything and everything that he typed. And I got to see just how bad the rest of training got. It was pretty bad. The rest of the clan must have gotten blasé about it, but I still found something pretty fucked up about navigating through a level that was half gauntlet of death traps and half museum to poorly drawn art. Once into the junkyard, our name for the area, with the rusted metal walls. They stopped looking even remotely human, sporting the wrong number of eyes, impossible proportions, limbs with too many bends, like some sort of bizarre sexualized cubist painting. When I tried to bring it up, the others just shrugged it off, told me to shut up and move on. In their defense, once the players hit the junkyard, they're on the clock. The corpse will keep on asking the player watching her for a name to pick off, and the wait in between will get shorter and shorter. The messages that she forced Honk to type got stranger and stranger too. I was expecting it to try and fake us out with messages to abort, instructions to press Alt and F4, or graphic threats of violence. And to be fair, we did get our share of those too. But there were plenty that just seemed fairly innocuous or entirely non sequitur. Honk. I guess this is how leadership works, right? Honk. It's weird. She almost sounds sad now. He continues, I don't think she actually wants to kill any of you. She just needs me to understand. I'm getting close to the end now. That was a section of in-game messages. Now it goes back to narrator here. I'm getting close to the end now, and I ought to admit here and now that I don't have a way to close this. I can tell you everything that happened and why we never got to see the end of training. But if you want to know what happens at the end of the map, then your only option is to somehow hunt it down yourself. For obvious reasons, I can't recommend it though. End blog post. So this is the last blog post set in 2015 before we get to the last entry, which is 2017. This one is titled The Last Run. Delta Force made our last expedition into Training.Bsp on July 9th, 2005. Honk took corpse watching duty, and the rest of us made our way through the maze of traps. We'd figured it would be a run like any other. We had gotten used to the creepy chat messages that Honk was forced to communicate, and we were starting to get a handle on the way puzzles in the junkyard were. Things were going pretty smoothly when Honk spoke up in chat with a message we hadn't seen before. Honk. Guys, stop playing now. Honk. This isn't a message. This is serious. This run is over. Honk. Gotta go. Honk then disconnects. That was all I managed to record before the game crashed on me. The rest of the clan reported something similar. We didn't hear from Honk again. At the time, it was pretty easy to just vanish off the internet if you wanted. He deleted his account on our forums that night, as well as the email address that if he had a real name, we didn't know it. Things pretty much fell apart after that. Some of us supposed that the job of corpse watching just got to him, like it got to Divisible. Others speculated that his family, his home life was one of the few things that he was open about with us, came in and freaked out, and a bunch of them jumped back to the conspiracy theory about King. A few of us posted our findings on Planet Half-Life, but by then the community was dead, or mostly dead. I never really got to the bottom of Training.Bsp. My life got kind of complicated for a while after that, and I drifted away from FPS games. If it wasn't for the screenshot that I kept, I'd be convinced it was some weird, improbable dream. That's really all I have to share with you. I'm sorry if it's not the ending you were hoping for. We don't always get them, but I hope that at least it's been an interesting ride through one of the truly weirder bits of early 2000s first-person shooters. End blog post. Okay, so this is the last blog post on the website. It is dated December 7th, 2017. It's titled Update. I feel kind of bad about bringing this blog back to life after so long, but it would be wrong to leave this out. I managed to track Honk down. From time to time, if I'm drunk, if it's late, and if I have nothing better to do, I'll search online to see if anybody has uncovered anything new about it, or if I'm honest, to see if anybody remembers us. Usually, I don't find anything, but last night, there was something new. I don't browse Reddit as a matter of habit, but r/gaming had a thread about obscure video games where somebody had brought up the topic of Training.Bsp, and one of the voices, insisting that it was a hoax, seemed not only knowledgeable in the details of the game, but had a style that I couldn't help but recognize. Like I said, in the days before profile pictures were a thing, a person's typing style was everything. So I got in touch. I asked him if he used to go by the handle Honk on Planet Half-Life, and if he did, whether he felt like chatting again. It's probably easiest if I just post the transcript. Using the old screen names seemed weirdly appropriate, kind of like two old men squeezing themselves into drainpipe jeans to try and go clubbing again. This is a pretty long series of what I guess are DMs, so I'll be flipping back and forth between the two characters. Honk. So I was honestly wondering if I'd ever be to have this conversation, and here I am. So I guess that answers that. Prof Player 1 says, I'm just glad you're okay. Yeah, it was a rough couple of years, but honestly I'm better off out of the leadership. Too much stress. Still, that's what leadership is. You have to put yourself forward. Do the dirty jobs that nobody else is willing to do, because it would tear them apart if they had to. Professor Player responds, dirty jobs is right. I still get nightmares sometimes about staring at that corpse. Honk. Yeah, you and Divisible were the only ones who knew what it was like. How is he, by the way? Professor Player. They're the only ones I stay in contact with, but much happier. Less fucked up. Probably for the best that it ended when it did. Honk. You think so? Man, after we got that far in, you're not curious about how it ends? Because I still have a copy, and I've been in touch with a few of the others. I reckon we could make a pretty good go at it, if we tried. What do you say? I could add you on Facebook, we could talk it over. Professor Player, you want to try again after all that? Honk. Dude, it's just a game. They're not real. Nothing is. Professor Player. Maybe. I've kind of moved on from gaming now. Honk. Well, we are all kind of rusty, yeah. Professor Player. The reason I got in touch was that I wanted to make sure you were safe. You sounded like you were freaking out when you quit. No contact details or anything. Honk. Oh, that. Yeah, the game got to making all sorts of threats to me. Pretending it knew where I was, threatening to kill me, kill my family. Just some cold reading and lucky guesswork. Looking back on it, but at that age, well, you have a tendency to take what people on the internet tell you for granted. Anyway, while we were playing, my mom took a fall down the stairs. Broke her hip. We had to rush her to the hospital. No one's fault, but I got the idea in head it was me. Or the game. Or whatever. That it was real. Freaked out for a bit. Just tried to get far away from it as I could. Professor Player. Who the fuck are you? Honk's mom died when he was 5. Honk has left the conversation. End blog post. Okay, so that was Training.Bsp. Honestly, I liked it. I wanted to save reading the story for when I recorded it because I wanted to try and capture first reaction to it. Hopefully that didn't come through with my amateurish narration, but yeah, I really liked it. And on trying to find stories to read for this video, I found plenty of garbage. Like, originally, the idea for this video was going to be reading, like, trash creepypasta, but then I thought that might be a little misleading. I think if people are interested in long-form narrations, they kind of want the story to be good, and based off of some reactions, I thought that there was potential for this story to actually be decent, and yeah, I would say it was a little better than that. It wasn't a masterpiece, though. I was fighting back a smile when I had to read r/gaming at the end there. And although I guess I didn't really see it coming, the ending with the whole, like, Honk's mom has been dead since he was 5. Like, I feel like I've seen that before. It both surprised me a little bit, but also kind of made me smile at the same time. Like, I thought it was a little funny. Also, so he was just, like, browsing r/gaming? Like, I guess this is something interesting to think about with the ending here, is that, so he found Honk on r/gaming, but, Honk turns out to be the person who made the map. But he says one of the voices insisting that it was a hoax seemed not only knowledgeable in the details of the game, but had a style that I couldn't help but recognize. So, like, this Honk that he found on Reddit is, like, telling people that it's a hoax and trying to turn people away from it. And at first, I'm sitting here thinking that this might be a plot hole, but now I'm thinking maybe this is an extra layer to the story, because the only plot point here that isn't wrapped up is this character named King, who you would feel is, like, motivated to take some kind of revenge on them. They have these theories about that. They reference it throughout the story, Chekhov's gun, but it never comes back. But what if this is that? Why would the map maker turn people away from the map if it weren't to target specific individuals, right? He doesn't want other people to find this out, but he tries to convince Professor Player 1, or I'll just say the narrator. I don't want to say Professor Player 1 constantly, but He's trying to invite the narrator and a couple of the other friends back, and maybe by posting on Reddit, he's hoping to get someone's attention. Somebody from that group again, which I feel like is this implication that it's actually King, that it's confirmation that it's King, that the map was designed for that group of people to get back at them. And maybe the implication there is that King would be familiar with Honk, and he would have been able to like track Honk down or something. Well, I guess if Honk's mom was already dead, then like she couldn't have fallen down the stairs. So we don't actually know what happens to Honk. We just know that he leaves very quickly. So I guess we don't actually know what the corpse said to Honk that scared him. We don't actually know if the map maker or this corpse anime girl has any information on them. So I guess he doesn't really need to know Honk in real life. But if Honk's mom was never killed, then like nothing actually happened to anybody in real life. Like they were just scared by this map in Half-Life, in Sven Co-op, right? After thinking through that, like, yeah, I think maybe the implication here is that Honk is possibly King in disguise, and he wants to bring them back together so that he can continue to fuck with them. But after thinking through it for a bit, I guess all of this seems a little funny, which is, I guess, the critique I have for the story, which is like, well, what if they got back together and they started going through the map again? Then like, well, what would happen to them? You know, like Honk's mom was never actually pushed down the stairs, and you know, it's not like King broke into Honk's house and killed him in the middle of playing the game. He just got scared somehow. I think King probably knew something about Honk and was probably like, you know, here's your address, boo. Yeah, I think the implication absolutely has to be that who's impersonating Honk and the person who made the map are King. This person who's impersonating him has to both know about their clan and has to know about the corpse. And seemingly only the map maker and the original clan would know about that. And then there's that whole like thread that's left open with King. So I think that's definitely what is being said here. King would have to have done like a lot of funny shit and would have to have done a massive amount of effort just to get back at his old clan, and is like still trying to bait them in on Reddit like 12 years later, despite King like hating these types of I guess exploratory, like abstract, you just kind of chill and mess around kind of vibe maps. But he spent all of this time essentially designing a very elaborate one to just waste everybody's time and creep them out. There really is no consequence at the end. Like, the guy's mom was not attacked or anything. Seemingly nothing happened to Honk, but I guess we confirmed that. The friend group just kind of fell apart, sort of. Actually, I guess they just went their separate ways. And the narrator isn't really harmed at all. He just kind of fucked with them. I should also mention that in looking into this story, it seems like it was actually inspired by a series of maps made by a person named Hondo, who was known for making very abstract, crazy maps in Half-Life that had these like elaborate puzzles, much like what is described in the story. In fact, one of these maps actually has a suitcase that I believe has a 3D model of a corpse in it, just like the story. There's a video by a YouTube channel called The Monotonist that has an exploration of those maps. And so when I was reading the story, I was able to really picture what was going on because some of the imagery is taken from those maps. You know, taking that as inspiration and repurposing it into a short story, a creepypasta, where the intention behind those maps is malicious and is being personally presented to you by someone that you might know. Someone who might try and track you down on Reddit 12 years later. So I do think it's really its own thing. The whole aspect where you start to think that the meat of the story is going to be this super crazy map that like throws a bunch of enemies at you that you have to keep fighting. But then it surprised me in that, you know, this kind of spooky element with this corpse that you have to watch. Like, first of all, I don't read a lot. So I've never encountered an idea like that, forcing a player to watch some kind of disturbing content as an element in the story. I thought like, wow, okay, that's pretty interesting. And you think we're just going to gloss past that, but it takes what I thought was a pretty effective plot point and it expands on it. You think that you're going to watch this group of people continue onward and just see like, oh, there's like more enemies over here and there's guys over there. But one player has to stay behind. And so the story and the horror in the story more so comes from the fact that this one player has to stay here. Not because, Sonic.exe is possessing you to stay there, but because of peer pressure. And there's kind of a parallel between that and like the social pressure of like, all of your friends are moving on, playing other types of maps and video games, and you want everything to stay the same, which is what I imagine King would have felt seeing his friends, not want to really play the same way or to play the same games. And so I thought that was really impressive. That impressed me.